Okay, here we are at the start. As I say, it's the Entangled Land, a sense of here. It's about our journey last July between the various lockdowns to, I suppose, sum up a project we've been working on over a couple of years called Sense of Here. And we thought the best way to actually bring this project to a close or a semi-close was actually to do this walk. And it was on the basis of working with this team, Ensemble. And in the background there by the door is Professor Gordon Blair, who set up this fellowship program to look at climate change over the preceding or over the coming 5 years. This is all fresh-faced at the beginning.
Yeah, and there's over the 5 years, the team has kind of expanded and shrunk. A lot of different people have come in around the core team, and we've been discovering more about different disciplines, different ontologies, different ways of looking at the same question from different angles. We've learned about modeling and lots of different environmental sciences, kind of fragments in a shared landscape. So we've used our practice to try and bring together the different strands. But it is very complex, so it's not a matter of making everything simple.
Yeah, and as always with some of the projects, or many of the projects we work on, we like to talk to folk who know their stuff, experts in their field, and that can be from the world of conservation, from land management, from river restoration projects, from hill farmers, and from the various scientists and data specialists and monitors and people on the ensemble team who've come in and out of the project over the 5-year period. We love hearing things from people who know their stuff, and it kind of feeds into our understanding of place and landscape and helps us get an understanding about what's going on out there.
Yeah, and we bring our kind of other questions into the rooms as well. So a lot of the research and the meetings along the way have been in rooms, but we tend to like doing a lot of our research outside so that we're feeling with our hearts and our bodies what we also have to consider with our minds.
Yeah, this was right at the very start of the Sense of Here project in January the 9th, 2019. We remember it well. Went up onto the summit of Helvellyn, and we're there as darkness fell. We're up there on our own. And from the middle of the Lake District, which it more or less is, you can see all edges of the Lake District National Park, all edges of Cumbria. And whilst it seems like it's not a very big place, you then understand that all the folds in the landscape takes in a lot of different habitats, land types, hefts, if you know your sheep land. And it was from up there we started piecing together the idea about what we might be doing over the course of the coming year. We broke the Lake District National Park down into a clock face, a series of segments, these 30-degree segments that started at a single tree, that red dot in the middle, which is the Underhelm sycamore, which is a kind of a legacy from our last long-term project, the Longview, this single sycamore tree which hugs the scree slope, and then broke the Lake down to these chunks to look at these different, I suppose, value systems, ways of thinking.
Yeah, I mean, the Lake District is very close to where we live. We live just in Kendal. And we wanted to use it as an example for a piece of land where there are lots of different asks on the same piece of land, lots of different opinions about how it needs to be used, and also some environmental challenges and impacts from climate change that are familiar in lots of other areas. So it kind of proved to be a good testing ground to look at these issues and to see how they played out on the ground.
But as well as the kind of cerebral way of thinking, we also wanted to use our creative practice to actually try and do something that was a little bit different, to shake it all up. So over the course of the 12 months, we took this single piece of heavy-duty canvas, placed it on a photographic stand, and then moved it around the various clock faces, the various sort of chunks of the clock face, changed the words, they were stuck on with Velcro, and then moved it around as the year progressed. It was a nice way of thinking about the space.
Yeah, and it took me quite a long time to come up with the sets of words for each month, because as you can see, there are only a certain number of letters that I could get onto the canvas. And so what emerged was a kind of a fragmented poem that was incomplete. And I used the phrases on the canvas each month to stimulate thinking alongside the other research we were doing. But it wasn't really a complete poem. It was just the start of something.
So we started in January on the old coach road, if you know it, which is at the northern end of the Helvellyn Ridge by kind of Threcold, between Threcold and Clough Head, that kind of area. That's Blencathra, you can see off to the right. So we put the canvas up on a very windless day, and it stayed there for about 2 hours while we responded to it, thought about it, saw the weather come and go, and then packed it up and hoofed it out again. It's quite heavy, to be honest, carrying that thing, but it was worth doing over the course of the year. So that was January. And then come December the 19th, I think it was, that was the final placement of the canvas on low rig near St John's in the Vale. So it had gone all the way around the clock face and then finished up in this little position here.
So each month of the year, we were taking walks within those segments that we'd marked out on the clock face. But we knew that somehow we had to join the dots. And you can see on this map, the blue squares are the locations of the canvas. So we decided we had to walk between them.
Of course we did.
Yeah, so that took quite a long time, which is what we're going to talk about. The orange triangles, which are on the actual 30-degree lines that radiate out from the sycamore tree, are the places where we camped each month. So that was a different way for us to gather data, including temperature data and including photographs and poetry along the way.
It also allowed us to get our boots very frozen in November and December in the snow, but that's another story.
Yeah. So joining up the canvases was a way of really treading a way through the poem and seeing what emerged in terms of poetry. We also saw it as a way of inhabiting the spaces in between. And there's a lovely Japanese word called ma, which is the space in between. And it's a very important space rather than always focusing on identifiable summits or points of interest. So we went out for this walk, but we weren't just walking through the land. We were carrying all of the words from the interviews we'd conducted throughout the year in 2019. We spoke with between 50 and 60 people who are experts by experience, by academia, just through what they know. And we called this piece 101 Lenses. Gordon Blair refers to the necessity to appreciate complexity in the environment. And there's no way you can begin to understand it if you don't look at it through 101 lenses. So we carried all of these thoughts with us.
We also carried blooming big rucksacks, which was great because we needed all that gear, our tent and our cooking gear and our food. And we set off bright and fresh from Grasmere on one day. This Sally Fraser, my sister, who I think is tuning in tonight, took this photograph. It was looking quite good. And this was at the start of day one, obviously. And then we went up to the tree because we had to start and finish at the tree. So this is the Underhelm sycamore. This great tree which just hangs on the edge of this scree slope, which many of you will have seen if you drive up the A591 over Dunmail Raise. Look left next time you go up from Grasmere, you will see it.
At any one time, any one tree could be the center of the universe. We choose a single sycamore, a still point to center us in this spinning world. And with slow steps, we begin to thread our way through land, time, and weather. And the weather really meant that the clouds were on top of Helvellyn. So we were going to head up and over that ridge and go over all the Dodds, and we decided that it wasn't worth it because we wouldn't be able to see where we were going. But you know, that's serendipity. So we took the low route, which meant we went through St John's in the Vale and past the woodshed of our friend Jamie.
Yeah, we'd chosen a piece of sycamore that had blown down in the wind at Brockhole, the Lake District National Park Centre. They knew we were looking for a piece of sycamore to realise an art piece to go into the exhibition. So Jamie was drying that out for 6 months. He wasn't in. We just popped into his shed and opened the door and went to look at it on the way through. And it seemed like a nice way of touching the piece of wood that we were going to be responding to further down the line.
And one of the challenges over the next 2 weeks was to decide what to write on that piece of wood.
Yeah, no pressure there then. So this, talking about data, because in a way this is all about data. This is the data from day one's walks. The azure bright blue line is the way we went, looks quite simple. The graph below is the track. that we walked up and down. You can see it was nearly sort of 14.7 miles, quite a long way on day one. Yes, it was a long way. So there's that data. And here's the data of Harriet climbing up the final slope on the old coach road to get to our first night's camp spot, which is this beautiful wee spot near an old sheepfold, a sheep dub by the river. You don't know it's there unless you know it's there, if you know what I mean. So it's a great little spot. So that was the end of day one. And this was the beginning of day two, stopping by the first of the canvas spots, the TikTok canvas, and Harriet recorded some thoughts where we placed that canvas in the pouring rain. It was raining quite hard by now.
Yeah, great summer weather. So I'm just going to read a poem, one of the poems that was inspired by sitting with the canvas back in January. Tick tock. I sit with 2 words lifted from the thought of clocks into this place. Tick tock. Here now, the time of breath, the pace of walking, the slow rise of raven into clouds, sun's arc, the passing of days, the lifetimes of insects, the sleep of animals, dormant while the land is blanketed with snow. Eons shift to a different rhythm. Tick tock. I sit with these 2 words. Mind turned now not to slow things, but to the rapid pace of change and the count of short years before tipping points of warming, of loss. Tick tock. This metronomic reminder lies hidden in the digital age, yet is ever present. Tick tock. Now, now. Now is the time to choose. Head in the sand, head in the snow, or heads up. Tick tock. And when we put that canvas up, the report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had just come out, giving very severe warnings about the pace of climate change. Since then, there's been another report, which is even more shocking, but that was very much on our minds at the time.
So from that point, we carried along the coach road and then dropped down the road to Matterdale to the shores of Ullswater. Feet very sore by now, by the way. So it was quite nice to pop into a cafe in Glenridding and get a bap, a restorative bap, and eat like some sort of feral child, and then sort of get on our way again. And we passed by the February canvas spot, which is Silver Bay on the far side of Ullswater from the main road there. So that was ticking it off. This was a particularly hard canvas to put up. When we put it up, it was very windy. We didn't know what we were working with at that time in terms of wind, but we realized very quickly anything more than a mile breeze, and it's going to be a struggle for that to stay up. So yeah, that sort of set the scene for the rest of the year, and we realized how we could put the canvas up, what kind of conditions we could put it up in. So it was good to get it, but it was nice to pass in February.
It was great to pass by, and along the way while we were walking, we did stop a lot. I did a lot of writing notes, and Rob did a lot of taking pictures. I'm just going to read a few notes that I wrote here in Silver Bay. At Silver Bay, we sit where we placed the February canvas: land, sky, water, the fundamentals of life, from which all else emerges, on which all else depends. Rain sweeps over Sheffield Pike, voices travel over the dark water of the lake. As we stroll on, our bodies remind us that this walk is not just about charting a landscape. It's also a mapping of our own struggle and adaptation, a gradual strengthening and the effort needed to keep going. We are finding our way through a place that holds both beauty and challenge.
Day 2 camp spot, we found a very small place, flat space by the side of this stream, and that was a chance for Harriet to make her notes and me, to wash. The following day, we kind of woke up again, and once more it was raining. You know, it was kind of setting a pattern. It was a bit of a shame. We were imagining in July having to sort of wear sunscreen and big hats and sunglasses, but it was not much of that, I'm afraid. But we don't mind walking these kind of conditions. You know, it's atmospheric, to say the least. And this is a reminder that not every path that's marked on the map is visible on the ground. And it could be an old Chinese saying, but it's not. It's a very Cumbrian saying. So that the path we were following wasn't very obvious, as you'll see now.
Oh, well, That wasn't expected. We basically weren't following a path then at all, but we found one now. It's quite tough to start the morning off like that. That's the clean version of the video.
Yeah, day by day, body takes over mind, shows what it knows, learns as it goes. I've done a lot of walking over the last, well, since I've been started walking really, but a lot of long distance walks. And I've found that when you're carrying a heavy load, it takes about 3 days for your body to get set, for your shoulders to start not hurting, for your feet to start not hurting, and just to get in that rhythm, that pace of setting up camp and walking for not very many miles, 10, 12 miles, sometimes a bit further than that. But you do need time to get settled into that kind of rhythm. And then you end up in camp spots like this, with views like this, with a cup of tea in your hand, and everything feels so much better. And it allows Harriet to sort of stretch out and make a note in the warm sun. Just a nice way of being. As any of you have camped in the fells, you know that the challenges of doing it are far outweighed by the joys of actually being there.
We could navigate the statistics of carbon storage through the pages of a book, but that's not where you find wet moss and time stored in dark earth, the buzz of insects, or the joy of sunshine after rain. We woke this morning to sunshine and curlews calling and blue sky. Although the ground underfoot is wet, we are warm and our spirits are high. At our feet, mosses spread between grasses, bog asphodel, tormentil, and heather. Tadpoles in puddles have sprouted legs. Meadow pipits and skylarks seem to be loving the warm morning. On this open patch of land, there has been a lot of tree planting, and there's a feeling of new life and optimism. I'm guessing the sunshine adds to that. And the more I walk, the more I feel at home, looking across to hills where I placed my feet yesterday, the day before, last month, last year. I watch clouds gather and pass, sunlight glint off the lake, brown butterflies flit among the heather. The lichen on a single boulder steals my attention, and then a kestrel settles on a fence post, and I'm lost in its curious gaze.
So these quotes that are sort of popping up on some of the slides are just some of the words that people have said to us during the course of the interviews that we did in the year before. And this was from Colin Cox, who's the Director of Public Health in Cumbria. And when we met him, we were quite surprised to find out that he placed a healthy environment at the top of the tree. So the healthy environment, everything else kind of spins off that. So for him, setting up the challenge of getting a very an environment in fine fettle really, really does help with everything else that goes on within the communities. And this is coming up to Nambild Pass, which is, a really nice walk up from Hawes Water, then I think it's Small Water or Lee Tarn, I always get the two mixed up. So you've got this final pull up to the top. And it sort of occurs to me that, we've become, if you like, how do we describe it in terms of our own bodies? You kind of know what you can do. You become comfortable in that element after a while, and you just fit within the landscape. You become experts about what you can do in place and how to deal with it.
How
really.
To pace yourself and what to do.
And at the end of day 4 in the bottom of the Kentmere Valley, where we placed the April canvas in this moment, and Harriet making notes on her expanding concertina notebook that she prepared before.
Yes, I made a book before I left so that I would have a double-page spread for each day, and it was gradually filling up. I'm just going to read a little bit of a note from here. In this moment slide, remembering in this moment, I sink deeper into the moment and let the place and the rhythm of walking settle within me. Body, land, land, body. This is what it has come to. Awareness of body, awareness of land, a mapping of place and feeling. The walk is a long meditation interspersed with navigation, making camp and breaking camp. Time slowly passing around mountains, rivers, and still moments like these.
Yeah, of course, a lot of the landscape we were walking through, none of it's wilderness really. There's some wild spots and there's some wild within us all, but you know, you're walking through a working landscape, a taskscape, a feltscape in a way. You know, you feel your way around it. You kind of get to know the landscape and what's over the fold of the next set of mountains. So it's quite an intimate place, I think, for us now, having walked it extensively for the last couple of decades. So it's a nice place. But you still come across these joyful patches. You know, I've always loved walking along this stretch going up towards the Cumbria River by this sheep dub, where shepherds traditionally would have brought their sheep down to force them through the stream to wash them and then sort of force them on the way back out to the fells again. So it's just nice having this moment to pass a place that's got this kind of a work association to it. And there is the wall of the Cumbria Reservoir behind us in the background.
Oh, this is the feltscape. This is when you have to take your bag off and stretch. Yeah, another tricky day, actually. It is quite challenging, particularly walking on roads. And when you can't get away from them, you just can't get away from them, but they're not very comfortable.
No, they're not very comfortable. And I found myself the first 4 or 5 days walking right on the edge of the grass just to try and protect my feet and my ankles a little bit, because it was sore, but I got through it, thankfully. And I found a shop in Ambleside and bought some footbeds, which helped me. Coming down one of the routes, the green lanes down into Troutbeck Valley. Really
yeah,
nice.
It's interesting looking over the landscape there. At the time that we passed through, a lot of the fields were being cut for hay, and passing through the Lake District like this in one long continuous walk allowed us to see the many different ways that the land is used, farmed, cared for. Some people cutting their fields for the first time in the year, some people making a second or a third cut. You've got open fell and woodlands and conifer plantations and new plantations, and a lot of peat and peat restoration. So it's very difficult when looking from a data analysis point of view or modeling to find models that work wherever you are, because place is so specific and so different in every valley. And those are all the cerebral thoughts that we were again talking about, but we get to the end of the day and we just find a tiny little patch. And this day, it has never happened to me before in my life, but there was a complaint that we were in somebody else's territory. We heard some screaming, and it was a tiny frog. I had put my rucksack, I think, in the way of the frog coming out of the bracken and back into the beck.
Yeah. It made a noise, actually, quite a strange noise, is how it says.
Yeah.
So that was a nice camp spot on Loughrig, on the edge of Loughrig, to pitch your tent up and then leave in the morning. And then get a sort of a scene like this, you know, the small detail of the foxglove with the dew all around it, and then Nab Scar opposite Loughrig Tarn. So that was a really, Rydalwater. So it was a really nice start to that day. A long day, and we decided, because it was a long way to the 6th canvas on Whitbarrow Scar, that we couldn't do that walk in one go. So we cheated a little bit, although it's not cheating because we make the rules. There are rules, and we caught the bus from Ambleside through to Windermere, and then walked from Windermere, and then pitched up on Whitbarrow Scar, which is we both love this landscape. We both know it pretty well. And it was a no-brainer for us to place one of the canvases or a canvas on that kind of landscape, light and shade. It felt very apt with seeing so many of the ash trees, possibly or probably due to ash dieback, but also probably due to drought, really struggling in that kind of conditions to actually put on in good order. You know, a lot of them are really struggling now. Yeah,
it's a limestone landscape, and it does get very dry. Beautiful place. I'm just going to read some notes that I wrote. The canvas we placed here in May 2019 held the words light and shade. I sit where the canvas was and rest my feet, which are throbbing. There's something of light and shade in this walk, with our moods following the contours of land, weather, and energy levels. The shadow of a dying ash tree lengthens over my face. Like so many trees here, it holds few leaves. Its skeletal form is as white as sun-bleached limestone. It pushes leaves out in bursts, trying to survive, but it is failing. A combination of dieback and a changing climate stacks the odds against this and so many other ash trees. While other things will take their place, there's an inevitable passing. We sit under a blue sky. the quiet evening interrupted only by grasshoppers, and we ponder the closing down of things, the evening of life, the passage towards darkness, and the turning of the earth towards morning.
I put this image in, it was on Whitbarrow Scar, just because I like it really. We think it's a parasol mushroom. It's just a beautiful, large mushroom. It was about 8 inches tall, so it's quite a big specimen. To actually see something that big, that small, if that makes sense, it just brings a moment of joy to us on the walk. So it was nice to see that and contemplate it. And then disaster. Tent failure that night. I sat down on the edge of my tent and broke the pole on the roof. So that created its own little frisson of excitement. That and the cows that were wandering on the top of the scar that kept coming across to look at us and were a little bit scary. So we had to sort of bail out the next day, and my sister Sally and Harriet's daughter Rosa came out to pick us up so we could go back home and fix that and have a night. We knew it was going to be raining the next day anyway, so we weren't too sad about that. So it was a time for a tent fix and a bit of a fill up with food and a good night's kip, and then back out on the trail again. But in between times, we had a short walk with our dog Gilly. We deemed now at age 10, he was a bit old for us to do a long journey like this, but it was still nice to get out. Although to be fair, I think he has got the energy. We're just a bit worried if he hasn't, what we do with him. You can't just leave a dog tied to a tree for 10 days. So we thought we'd leave him out.
The quote on this page is from somebody we spoke to at the Centre of Ecology and Hydrology, discussing the quality of water in lakes and rivers, not just in Cumbria, but across the UK. And it's really interesting about targets that are set on data or ambition, and how we can meet them or not, and how we value or how we measure success in cleaning up the environment. And Windermere, which is so well loved, is it's troubling to think about that as an environment for the fish that live there, as the habitats and the climate's changing. There's a lot of silt lower down, and the temperature of the water is getting higher, so that fish have a much smaller place to live, fish that for centuries and millennia have lived in this cold water. So it's quite sobering when you think how much you might love it as a view, what's actually going on for the species that depend on it.
And this was us getting back into the fells proper again, away from the soft lands, and trotting up. This is kind of, is it Greenup? Yeah, it's Greenup, isn't it? Yeah, just by Little Langdale, above Little Langdale. So we come up onto this place called Hell Gill, which is brilliant. I love, you look at the maps and it's full of poetry. Just Harriet, I told Harriet to go and sit on that block, which she did readily. And then of course she starts making notes, because how can you not make notes when you're sat in a position like that?
Yeah, so I can read some of the notes that I wrote. High above Greenburn Valley on Hellgill Pike, I balance on a boulder that marks the edge of the fell, the edge of safe and sensible. Below me, the bowl of Greenburn, ribboned with waterfalls, holds deep time, the visual echo of glacial scrape, the memories of shepherd's calls, and the passing shadows of today's clouds. Far in the distance, fells are a rippling scene of shadows. I feel a rush of awe and pleasure at the memory of being so very far away just days ago. Our walk is tightening the threads between places. We're linking up information as well. All seems so picture perfect, but there's more to it. And as we walk, we talk about what we've learnt this past year, how peat restoration is going well and is so critical for carbon storage and biodiversity, where veteran trees are thriving, where tree planting is taking place, where soil quality is improving, and where more trees are needed, and where cows are encouraging orchids and other flowers to grow, but how the lakes and tarns are declining in quality. Above all, how the land may become more resilient to the effects of a changing climate with help. Our walk takes us through a weave of feeling and knowing, and we see it with new eyes every day.
So there was the campsite for the end of that day. Seathwaite Tarn, another lovely spot. In fact, the lakes is full of lovely spots, but a very easy place to put up a tent and just sit down and then get the map out and then plan where we were going to go the next day, or the route of the next day. You know, it depends on the weather. It depends on, you know, what might be in the way or which routes we want to take. But every time you have to think about where the canvas was placed and link up that space and then move on from that point. So Harriet's sort of poring over the notes, and that's one form of pouring. And then we wake up the next day to another form of pouring, which is this.
Seize the bay! Right. We'll start getting the tent down.
Sorry about that. We did seize the day, and that was the last of the energy we felt for a long while. Actually, it was very wet coming off that and dropping down into the Devon Valley. Challenging conditions, but you kind of get used to it. Your boots are wet; they can't get much wetter. You just got to suck it up in a way. And it's having that tools in your box to cope with those kind of emotional roller coasters at times. You just put them on, you get on with it, you get everything set in its right order. You make sure that everything is put away in dry bags inside the rucksack, because there's nothing worse than sort of waking up to it or putting a tent up the next day and there's a damp sleeping bag. You just don't want that, trust me. And then we come down to where the August canvas was placed in our hands. We placed it on the bed of the river Duddon, but by the time we came through there in July, of course, you can see the river in full spate, and we couldn't put the canvas up at that time of the year. Then moving on through the forests, Hard Knot Forest, which is nearby to here, is being restored. There's a lot of work going on, both in terms of tree planting, but also in terms of natural regeneration. So 10, 12 years on in the project, or is it even longer, I think?
It's been going on a long time. And actually the map that we were using was a bit confusing because there are a lot of trees on the ground that aren't on the map. So we had to do a bit of navigation there.
Yeah, and what was really annoying with this walk, we knew where we wanted to go.
Wet.
We got carried further and further around. We couldn't find the path that we wanted to get down onto Estelle Valley down below us, and we ended up going to the foot of Hard Knot Pass, which is far further around than we wanted to go, and then dropping down to the Wild Camp that night, which was actually the National Trust campsite. We'd run out of energy. We stopped briefly into the Woolpack, and bearing in mind this was between lockdowns, it was rammed, so it felt really quite strange actually going into a building with lots of other people wearing masks and all that kind of, if you remember back a year ago, that newness of going into buildings where there's lots of other people. But still, it was a nice place to sort of spread out and Harriet to make her notes and us have our tea and just sort of reset again. That's what each day was about resetting.
Yeah, walking up through Miterdale Forest, place we hadn't walked before, so that we could go into the Wasdale Valley. Just the whole place smells of soil and earth and leaf litter, and it's very nice to see how the earth is regenerating itself under the trees. There's also a lot of larch having to be removed there because of disease. So there's a lot of give and take and a lot of loss and a lot of gain going on.
Mm. And if you want to know whether you can eat these or not, don't eat these. These are dodgy ones. These are the fly agaric, that classic fairy tale mushroom, which we're chuffed every time we see them. I mean, who doesn't like that kind of thing to see it? But don't eat it, guys. Coming down off the ridge, I think it's either Ilfell or Winhead. Ilfell, I think. Then dropping down into Wasdale. Very ploshy coming down off this, just a series of bogs you're walking through on the way down into the valley floor. And we decided, we'd seen the weather report, we managed to get some internet signal and just sort of click on and find out the next day was going to be grim as grim, very grim, double rain sort of showers the whole day, all the way through from 8 in the morning. So we stayed there overnight. And then the next day, the following day, we had, after our day's rest in Wasdale, we set off up to Blacksail Pass, crossed this stream, always tricky crossing a stream after heavy rainfall. And then the other side of Blacksail Pass, that's Blacksail Pass you can see off to the left. We came down into Ennerdale Valley, then crossed up again and just turned our backs to see these kind of clouds, these veils of rain coming through. And in that scene, within a minute before that, we watched a merlin just chase a skylark through that void in the space. And it was kind of this to and fro between the two of them. And then all of a sudden, from the right of scene came the second merlin and just took this skylark out of the air. It was one of those, it was, joy, I suppose, in a way, not for the skylark, obviously, but to see that, to witness that. And I think I've only ever seen merlins 2 or 3 times in my life, but to see a pair of them just chasing down a skylark was magic. Tough day for Harriet, I think, really.
Yeah, I got blown over that day. The wind was so strong. So the canvas site that we were visiting was the Each Act Matters canvas overlooking Buttermere, but we didn't rest there. We came and rested in a hut and just sat and listened to the rain battering against the windows. And then when the storm had passed, it all brightened up again. So very thankful for that.
And we walked down to the Honister Cafe and had a sausage roll, which was great. And then up to Dalehead. Couldn't stay at Dalehead Tarn because it was very, very windy. And somebody else had got their tent there. So that moved us further down the slope on the other side. And we pitched up in this beautiful little campsite. I'm going to call this a campsite that somebody thankfully walled up for us. So it was a really nice spot to finish the evening.
Yeah, so we've shown some pictures of me filling in my book, and this is it when it was completed with my kind of a map on one side and my words and thoughts on both sides. And that's one of the ways that we were collecting our data as well as using a map. So this here is the profile of the walk on that day when we went up and down Blacksail and then up above Buttermere. You can see the different ways that it's presented. For the exhibition, we had to combine the data on the map with the data that I'd drawn to get everything to scale. And then the whole 13-day walk laid out like that kind of brought different elements of data all together. I'm going to read, do you want to say something about it?
No.
Yep, I'm going to read a poem about the whole walk. Resilience. This small skin-held society, my body, feels its way over grass and stone, leans into wind, an ecology of muscles, sinews, joints, eyes, feet. Knees find consciousness, pain rises, then eases, like a river after rain. Day by day, body takes over mind, shows what it knows, learns as it goes. When weariness sets in, the mind compels those final necessary movements to set up home, to make food, to eat. Then, lying flat, lets go, muscle by muscle, tendon and nerve, relaxes into healing. Over time, like land weathered, the body finds its strongest form to be upright and certain in the face of a storm.
So that was next morning with a cup of coffee, sat by this beautiful little beck flowing off the hills and just, I suppose in a way, contemplating how far we'd come. We knew we had a couple of long days still ahead of us, but it was still nice to reflect back on what we've done so far. And then coming down into the Newlands Valley, we knew we were going to come up to Keswick. So it was like trying to get ourselves set, ready to go back into Touristville. And then the November canvas, the Pause Imagine canvas in Windlatter Forest, we had to go out of our way slightly, make a detour to go up to the woods and then sort of come back to the main trail again. But that was nice to revisit that spot again. And I suppose this is one of the, it's all touristy in its own way, but to go to sort of a famous landmark like Castle Rigg Stone Circle and see lots of people there on a bright sunny day was really nice. Nice to feel that the people had come back to the hills, were enjoying it like we were enjoying it and just soaking in that atmosphere. It's a beautiful spot, to take in it. And you can see why maybe 5,000 years ago when the circles were set in place, why they would have put something like that in a landscape like that with everything going on around it. And here's the final canvas spot on Low Rigg. It was nice. So in a way, the challenge was done. I mean, we joined up all the maar, but it wasn't quite done because we knew that we had to walk back to the tree. So one more campsite just on the fells of High Rigg. So this was every morning chore, I suppose, is emptying out the tent of all the dust and the grass and things like that before you can pack it away. And then walk the final miles back to the tree. It was raining again. It rained a lot this day. Trudging along the side of Thirlmill Reservoir was quite hard going. As Harriet said earlier, walking on road is always hard work, and we were quite tired by now. And then those final few steps back to the sycamore tree where we started from 258 kilometres later, I think was, we were both happy with that, really, weren't we?
Yeah, and we did the full circle, we came back to where we started, but we will never see the landscape in the same way again. And also coming back to where we started wasn't even as if that was the end of the business. It was just starting yet again from there, but with a slightly different perspective.
So there's the blue track that we made through the landscape. We converted this to a file. So there's the walk, the dotted line, and the canvas spots and the tree marked. There's the words added onto it.
Yeah, I took a long time thinking about what words I could add and trying to write something new. And in the end, I went back to those notes written where I was sitting on Hellgill that day, and takes the act of going to the edge to see the clearest view. And that kind of reflected the challenge that we'd felt and the challenge of research and interdisciplinary teams. And we have to keep pushing to our edges to see where to go.
So then the next challenge was to translate that to that piece of wood that you saw. So we went to a chap called Martin on the edge of Kendal, who's got this fantastic machine that does all this kind of drilling. Basically, it's not laser cutting, he's drilling into the wood with these very, very fine precision tools. It took him quite a while, and to create the track on this piece of sycamore wood, we're really proud of it. It looks beautiful. Why wouldn't it? To hold the walk we'd done on a piece of sycamore just felt like a really apt thing to do. And here's those canvases again. So we joined up the spaces in between them, over those 13 days in July. And that's when the poem came together. That's when it all felt joined up. That's when things started to pull together in our heads, I think.
Yeah. So in one sense, the poem was completed in the act of doing it, and the landscape itself fills in the spaces. But in another sense, of course, there's a written poem. So I'm going to share that with you. A sense of here. Rocks become earth, clouds replace sun, flowers replace snow, day follows night. Might we take the stories of this place and let the tongues of land speak them back to us? Tick, tock. Step by step, our days become encounters with sky, land, water, and the thread of stories. We listen, weaving between deep time, weather time, this place crafted by human desires. Yet if all we see is shaped by hands, where is the wild? It comes up where it can. See, it is here in this moment of air and breath, the easing of moss over stone, the speed of merlins. It can be tempting to seek direction in memory and hope, but these make half-truths of place, skirt around the present as our paths pass through light and shade, trailing loss and gain, and bring us face to face again and again with a thought that laps like the insistent return of the sea. The whole of life is in our hands. Hush, here among trees, clouds, stones, witness to water, feel it in your heart, how each act matters, however small. There is a world to be found in a moment's expanse. Pause. Each act begins as an idea that can only grow when fed with love and daring. Imagine what can change.
And there we go. There you go, guys. Well, if you've got any questions, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and hopefully it will work. Yes. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to either...
Can we open up the chat?
Can we open up the chat? Or if you want to ask them, I don't know how this works, Will, whether people can ask questions themselves or what.
Okay, there's a question coming from Kate Wilson. If you could complete the walk all over again, would you do anything differently? If so, what and why?
I'd maybe move some of the canvases a bit closer together. I know that's not going to happen. I think we both love long distance walks, and I think it's nice to have a journey with a purpose. And this was our longest kind of project walk. I've done a lot of longer walks myself in various places. No, I think
I don't think we'd do it again in order to do it differently, because it had to be the way it was, because it was a continuation of the project and of our process, which included the weather and included the sore feet. And it was also determined by COVID in terms of when we could actually do it. Next time we do a long walk, again, it will be different, even if we cover the same ground.
Yeah, I
don't know, really.
I think we would have been nice to have a bit more sunshine. You know, I know I like atmospheric weather, but when it kind of rains a lot and you can't see much, it does make for it a little bit challenging. But no, you know, that's part of the lakes, really. It's part of the charm of it.
Got another, Melinda, was it intentional that the final shape of your walk is the shape of a mature tree? No.
Yes, yes, it was. Of course it was.
But we have to thank the choice of placing a canvas on Whitbarrow Scar for that stem or that trunk. And it was really important for us to include the limestone landscape, which is a very different habitat. In fact, when we chose that location, we hadn't planned the walk. But maybe everything looks like a tree if you join it up.
Yeah. Norman and Deb Hadley. Hi, guys. What were your impressions of insect health, size, numbers? Difficult one there. You know, there's a lot of spaces we walk through, you don't see a lot of insect life. But then in certain areas where I think they're changing their practice, the farming practice, because it's largely, in some senses, down to what grazes or overgrazing. You know, in some areas it was full of insect life. You know, we saw lots of butterflies, we saw caterpillars and things like that. Plenty of midges in some of the spots as well, and they count as insects.
I think
but
general,
it was cold as well. Don't forget.
It was cold. It was very cold. Yeah, but in general, quite low. And over the last 3 years, quite low. When we camped at Lingmore in July 2019, you know, ragwort usually gets covered with the cinnabar moth caterpillars, and there were barely any about. And there was one year when we saw pretty much none. I personally would say it's concerning, but I don't research it and haven't researched it closely over the years to kind of very...
No, I think that's one of our biggest bugbears in terms of Natural England. We love the people from Natural England, and it's not their fault because their numbers are reduced, their budget's been slashed and all that. So I don't think there's enough surveying going on in the landscape to actually work out where we're at now. So at least when going forward, you've got something to hold store by. You know, if you're not monitoring what's out there, then how do you know what's happening going forwards, whether that's having any effect?
Yeah.
So I think closer monitoring, and I think they're looking at now farmers getting more involved. They're going to be skilled up to actually look at their landscape to find out in more detail what they've got, how to monitor it. So at least you've got something to work to.
Yeah, and Butterfly Conservation Trust would be good people to ask about figures in Cumbria specifically, or the Biodiversity Centre at Tully House. It is difficult, and like Rob says, if you don't know what's out there, then you can't measure decline, and that's the problem of baselines and shifting baseline syndrome, depending on when you take your measurements and what you believe to be the point to work from.
Joe Birch has asked a nice question. Do you think that policy and enchantment ever overlap, and should they? They absolutely should overlap. You know, without that sense of wonder, without that sense of joy, without that sense of mystery, you know, we can't know everything about what's going on out there, nor should we. Then what's it all for? You know, to actually just look at it in the abstract, I think is absolutely missing the importance of enchantment. You know, we found plenty of enchantment on that walk, you know, many, many moments of joy. And lots of people, lots of organizations, and this isn't a criticism, by the way, talk about hard to reach audiences. And I think in some cases, the policymakers themselves are a hard to reach audience. You know, if you could get some people, sorry, that sounds really bad, but if you can get a group of organizations or people together and take them out on a couple of days walk through the mountains or through any landscape like this, and show them what's out there, then it may open their eyes to what they're working for. You know, what's it all for otherwise? You know, to get people outside, you talk about having children spending a night under the stars, get policymakers spending a night under the stars. You know, I think by getting those those kind of moments of joy embedded in people's work, day-to-day work, and making it less abstract will be a good step forward.
Another question from Helen Clark. The quote on the final slide, data is the first step, ... I'd like to attribute that to Mr. Gordon Blair. He got the first part of the sentence, the second part was mine. Thanks, Gordon. Yeah.
So Sally, who's no relation to me apart from being my sister, with all the people you engage with and all the issues you have come across, not just on this walk, what has been the most encouraging change you have seen in terms of environmental improvements or gains? How can that be transferred to focus other areas? I think there is good work going on. It's very easy to forget that there's not in all the doom and gloom. I think what needs to happen perhaps is those good bits, those places where things are working, is to have a greater propensity to be shown. So they become an exemplar about what's going on. But sadly, perhaps the news tends to focus, and it's the way that news is, gloom and doom sells better than good news sometimes, I feel. But we know even within the lakes, there's some really good work going on the ground out there by lots of good people across many organizations, many sort of communities. And I suppose our work is about showcasing those, shining a light on them, and making them not be seen as mavericks, making them be seen as the norm, the way that the norm could actually be going forward.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of natural flood management going on. And again, this isn't just in Cumbria, this is across the UK, where practice around rivers and riparian habitats is changing. Scientists are learning more about how the soil responds to different land use, and actually by slowing the flow or managing floods or flooding propensity, you are also having an increase in biodiversity. So that's really positive. Tree planting, but looking at the environmental gains is not to be, you mustn't forget that the fact that they're happening is because people are working together. So in order to get the environmental gains, what comes before that is linking people together, linking different communities and different thinkers and doers together. So I would say that is the positive. Where land is looking healthy, it's often because people are working together.
And it doesn't take much, sometimes you just need to step aside, and nature loves a vacuum, so if you take the pressure off certain things, then they will come back very quickly, as we found out in some of the valleys. Troutbeck, where we walked past, having seen that over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years now, and seeing how the flora and fauna has flourished again since they've reduced the stocking numbers, it's incredible. And that didn't take too long at all. And that was largely self-regenerated as well. So that's another interesting thing. The fact that you haven't got to go in and do this large-scale tree planting. You can sit back and the memory is in the soil. Things will come back given a bit of a chance. So, we're all up for that as well. So it's not just about massive scale.
But the animals are part of the landscape.
Totally.
And part of the fertility cycle and part of regeneration in the soil. So it's not simple, it's complex.
No, it's complex.
And it's ongoing. It's not necessarily about have we reached the answer yet. We're always looking at different questions and different answers together, I think.
Yeah, no, I don't think we'll ever reach the end. There's never that sweet spot. There's never that point in the middle where everything's cushy and we can go home, job done. It's a constant discussion, conversation. It's a live discussion about what we do, but looking at the information coming in and responding to that, trust the scientists, trust the data, use the data. But I think we've got an awful lot of data out there that we can trust. So now it's about translating that into action and getting the people who are in charge of making decisions to take up the baton and be brave, because sometimes these difficult decisions are hard. And it's about perhaps society accepting no and less more often than what we're being, what the populace would perhaps want to put forward. So we want to see a healthy environment. We love it. We love it when we see birds and butterflies and trees. It's brilliant.
So we're coming towards the 7:30 cutoff point. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, don't interrupt me. Don't get me off my soapbox.
But we've learned such a lot through this project, and we could have given a very different talk and listed all the different things we've learned from all the scientists. But the festival is jam-packed with conversations and threads and other bits and pieces and podcasts to dip into. So please go to the festival website, which Will is now going to paste into the chat so everybody can see it, and make sure you go and have a look through that. And this time tomorrow night at 6:30, we're going to be welcoming 3 other people for a conversation about art and artists in kind of inspiring action and working with environmental research. So if you'd like to join us, we're talking to Richard Paval, Edwina Fitzpatrick and Daksha Patel, who's one of the commissioned artists for the Entangled Festival. And we'll be just having a relaxed conversation with a very short slideshow from each of the presenters tomorrow night at 6:30. And there's the links in the chat if anybody wants to paste them.
And before that, at 6 o'clock, speaking of the commissioned artists, another one of the commissioned artists was a young woman called Sarah Smout, who plays a cello and she writes beautiful sounds. So the piece of music she recorded as part of the festival, I made a film of. Harriet and I went out and made a film of her making this film, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm really pleased with it. So it's going live tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on the festival website. So if you want to check in there and see what came of that song, it is worth listening to. I'm really proud of it as a piece of work, and Sarah's song is beautiful. So do check that one out. Right. 6:30, I'm going to go and get a beer and go and get me tea. Thank you, everybody, for turning up.
Thank you, everybody. It's really nice for us to revisit what we did and look at it in a different context again. So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, good night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Ensemble.
Will.